In this lesson, we're going to learn the rules for adding integers. So when you add integers, there are two rules that you need to remember. And the two rules depend on the signs of the numbers that you're adding together. So rule number one is that when you're adding integers with the same signs, that means that you're adding a negative plus a negative or a positive plus a positive. So when you add integers with signs that are the same, you add the numbers and keep the sign. So let's take, for example, negative 3 plus negative 2. This is considered adding integers with the same signs because both numbers have the negative sign. Negative 3 plus negative 2 says I'm going to add the numbers and keep the sign. So 3 plus 2 is 5. And I'm going to keep the negative. So negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5. Another example is negative 8 plus negative 2. Again, notice that the signs are the same. They're both negative. 8 plus 2 is 10, and I'm going to keep my negative sign, so negative 10. Pretty easy, right? And of course, you know the rules when they're both positive, like 5 plus 2 is 7. They're both positive and my answer remains positive as well. So this is the easiest rule to remember. If your signs are the same, add the numbers and keep the sign. Now it becomes a little trickier when signs are different. So when you have signs that are different, you're going to actually subtract the numbers and keep the sign of the number with the largest absolute value. Now, that definition can be a little tricky to understand, but I'm going to show you exactly how it works. So we have 4 plus negative 2. So since my signs are different, I'm going to subtract the numbers. So 4 minus 2, and when I do this, I'm not going to think about this negative. I'm just thinking about the numbers. So 4 minus 2 is 2. And then I'm going to keep the sign of the number with the largest absolute value. Absolute value means that when you take the absolute value of a number, you are explaining how far away this number is from 0. So the absolute value of 4 is 4 because it's 4 units away from 0. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2 because it's 2 units away from 0 on the number line. So when you take the absolute value of a number, you're taking the value of the number without regards to its sign. So if it's a negative number, you're just going to bring that number out without the negative sign. So the absolute value of any negative number is the value without the negative. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Okay? So when I look at these two numbers, the absolute value of 4 is 4, and the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. 4 has the greater value. It's positive, so my answer is positive. Now, you might be saying, well, why do you subtract when you're actually adding? And that's a great question. So you subtract even though you're adding numbers because when you add numbers that have different signs, you're actually moving in opposite directions. So for example, if I start on 4 on the number line, if I were adding a positive number, I would move to the right and my number would get larger, which is what we're used to. But if I'm adding a negative number, that negative means I need to move in the direction of the negatives. So I need to move in the opposite direction, which is to the left. So negative 2 means I'm going to move 2 spaces to the left, and that's going to put me on positive 2. So I subtract my numbers because I'm moving in the opposite direction, which means that my numbers are actually getting smaller. So I'm going to take the difference. Okay? And that works for all problems. So for example, if I take negative 7 and I add positive 2, notice that my signs are different. I have a negative number and I'm adding a positive number. So what I do is think of different signs, take the difference. Difference means to subtract. So 7 minus 2 is 5. So the number portion of my answer is 5. But now I need to figure out the sign. So the absolute value of negative 7 is 7, and the absolute value of 2 is 2. 7 is larger than 2. It is negative, and therefore my answer is negative. So negative 7 plus 2 is equal to negative 5. And let's look at just one more example just to make sure that you fully understand. We have negative 5 plus 11. So again, my signs are different. One's positive, one's negative. So different signs, take the difference. Subtract the numbers. 11, even though it comes second, it's okay. I'm always going to subtract the large minus the small. So 11 minus 5 is 6. And now I'm going to think about the signs. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5, and the absolute value of 11 is 11. 11 is larger, it's positive, so my answer is positive. So negative 5 plus 11 is equal to 6. Okay, so these are the two rules for adding integers. If the signs are the same, add the numbers and keep the sign. That's the easy one. If your signs are different, find the difference, subtract. Subtract the numbers and then determine the sign based on which number has the larger absolute value.